My son Nathan invited me for a drink at our old local pub, the Rusty Mug. Said he wanted to catch up. Just the two of us. But while he stepped out to take a call, the bartender Gus, a man I've known for 30 years, grabbed my arm. His eyes were wide, urgent. What he whispered next, it turned my blood cold. Something about Nathan, my own son, and plans I couldn't bring myself to believe. He told me to watch my back, especially around doctors and lawyers. He mentioned names. Suddenly, that friendly neighborhood pub felt like the walls were closing in like a trap waiting to spring. I knew right then I had to get out unseen. What I discovered just minutes later, hiding in the shadows outside a cheap lawyer's office, confirmed my worst fears and shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. It had started just a few hours earlier, pulling into Nathan's driveway. I'm Harold, 71 years old, and a visit to my only son should feel like coming home. But lately, something felt off. The house looked immaculate, maybe too immaculate for someone supposedly struggling after a bad investment, like Nathan kept mentioning. New landscaping, fresh paint on the trim. Things that cost money. I parked my own car, a reliable 10-year-old sedan I kept in good shape, grabbed my small overnight bag and headed for the door. Nathan opened it before I even knocked, a wide smile plastered on his face. Too wide. "Dad, you made it great to see you." He pulled me into a hug that felt more like a performance than genuine affection. Beatrice, my daughter-in-law, appeared behind him, smoothing her already perfect dress. She offered a polite, cool smile. "Harold, welcome. How was the drive?" "Drive was fine, Beatrice. Traffic wasn't bad," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled faintly of bleach and air freshener, not the comforting scent of home cooking I remembered from when Martha, my late wife, was alive. "Let me take your bag, Dad," Nathan said, practically snatching it from my hand. "You must be tired." "I'm 71, Nathan, not 91. "I can carry my own bag," I replied, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Beatrice laughed lightly, a sound like ice cubes clinking in a glass. "Oh, Harold, he's just trying to help. We worry about you living alone and all. Did you remember where we keep the guest towels this time?" There it was, the subtle dig wrapped in mock concern. "I remember, Beatrice. My memory's just fine," I said, forcing a smile. I looked around. New artwork on the walls, expensive-looking sculptures on the end tables. Where was the money coming from if Nathan's investment went sour? Good. Nathan jumped in quickly. "So, sit down, Dad. Can I get you something?" "Water, coffee, water's fine," I said, settling into an armchair that felt unfamiliar. They must have replaced the old comfortable one Martha and I picked out years ago. The small talk that followed was strained. Nathan talked about his sales job, throwing around impressive-sounding terms, but giving few real details. Beatrice chimed in occasionally, mostly asking about my health, in a way that felt more like an interrogation. "Are you taking your blood pressure medication regularly, Harold? You know how important that is at your age." "Every morning like clockwork," I assured her, though. Her constant reminders grated on me. Then Beatrice casually dropped it in. "It's been a bit stressful around here lately, Harold. With Nathan's little business hiccup. That investment advisor really pulled a fast one on him." She sighed dramatically. "We're tightening our belts, of course, but it's tough. Tightening their belts didn't look like it." I nodded noncommittally. "These things happen, son. You'll bounce back." Nathan shifted in his seat. "Yeah, well, about that, Dad. I was thinking, maybe it's time we, looked at simplifying things. For your future security, too." My internal alarm bells started ringing faintly. Simplify what, Nathan? I like my life the way it is. "Oh, just paperwork, finances," he said vaguely. "Make sure everything's easy to manage. Maybe I could help you organize things before I could press him." He suddenly clapped his hands together. "Hey, I've got an idea. Why don't we head down to the Rusty Mug for a beer?" Just us guys. Catch up properly. He glanced at Beatrice. Beatrice has that urgent work call she just remembered, right, honey? You won't mind if we slip out for an hour. Beatrice's eyes widened slightly in surprise, then she quickly composed herself. Oh yes, that's right. A client call. You two go ahead. Have fun. Her agreement felt too quick, too convenient. Why the sudden urge to go to the pub? We could talk right here. But maybe Nathan felt uncomfortable discussing finances in front of Beatrice. And honestly, a familiar beer at the mug sounded better than sitting in this sterile living room making awkward conversation. All right, son, I said, standing up. Lead the way. The rusty mug hadn't changed much in 30 years. Dark wood paneling, worn vinyl booths, the lingering smell of stale beer and fried food. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. Gus, the owner and bartender, looked up as we walked in. He'd taken over from his dad years ago, just like I'd taken over my dad's machine shop. He gave me a genuine smile and a nod. Harold, good to see you. Then his eyes flickered towards Nathan, his expression turning neutral, almost guarded. Nathan. Hey, Gus. Nathan said breezily, sliding onto a stool at the bar. 2 beers. I'll have that fancy IPA you got on tap last week. Dad, just my usual Gus, I said, settling onto the stool next to him. Domestic draft. Simple, reliable. Gus drew the beers without a word, his movements efficient. He placed mine in front of me, the coaster already damp. He seemed quieter than usual. Nathan took a long gulp of his expensive IPA. Ah, that hits the spot. So, Dad, how have things really been? You know, financially. Are you managing okay with the house upkeep, the taxes, everything? Here we go again. Everything's fine, Nathan. The house is paid off, you know that. My pension and Social Security cover the bills. I'm comfortable. Comfortable is one thing, Dad, but are you secure? He pressed. What if something happens, a big repair? Medical bills, it's important to have a plan. Maybe consolidate things. Have someone younger you know keep an eye on the accounts. His insistence felt like a drill boring into my skull. Nathan, I appreciate the concern, but I've managed my own finances my whole life. I know what I'm doing. But Dad, things are more complicated now. Online banking investments. It's easy to get overwhelmed or make a mistake. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Wouldn't it give you peace of mind, knowing I could step in if needed, just handle the paperwork, pay bills online for you? Peace of mind. His questions were doing the exact opposite. Why was he so fixated on this? Gus was wiping down the bar nearby, seemingly absorbed in his work, but I caught his eye briefly. He looked away quickly, but not before I saw a flicker of something. Concern. Disapproval. I took a slow sip of my beer, trying to gather my thoughts. Martha always said I was too trusting, especially with Nathan. Maybe she was right. I remembered her gentle warnings years ago about Nathan's spending habits, about his tendency to rely on us rather than stand on his own feet. Nathan checked his phone for the 10th time since we'd sat down. His thumb tapped furiously at the screen. Then his expression tensed. Shoot, he muttered. Sorry, Dad. Looks like a work emergency. Gotta take this call outside where it's quieter. Be right back, okay? He slid off the stool and hurried out the front door, phone already pressed to his ear. I watched him go, a knot forming in my stomach. A work emergency on a quiet afternoon. It felt like another excuse. I turned back to my beer, the familiar taste suddenly bitter. That's when Gus moved. He walked down the bar, picked up my empty glass, but instead of just refilling it, he leaned in close, his usual jovial expression replaced by one of grim seriousness. He glanced towards the door Nathan had just exited, then back at me. He put a hand flat on the bar, then quickly firmly grabbed my forearm resting there. His grip was surprisingly strong. Harold, he whispered, his voice low and urgent, barely audible above the low hum of the bar's cooler. My heart jumped. What is it, Gus? You're scaring me. He leaned closer, his eyes scanning the few other patrons at the far end of the room. Listen to me. I wouldn't say this if it wasn't serious. Your son, Nathan, and that wife of his, they're up to something. My breath caught. Up to what? What are you talking about, money, Harold? Your money, your house. Gus's words tumbled out in a rushed whisper. I've overheard things, snippets of calls he makes out front, conversations when they think no one's listening. They talk about needing access to your accounts, about how it would be easier if you weren't making your own decisions anymore. Making my own decisions, the phrase sent a chill down my spine, echoing Nathan's earlier probing. Gus, maybe you misunderstood. I started, but he shook his head vehemently. No misunderstanding, Harold. Last week, Nathan was here meeting some slick-looking lawyer type. Finch, I think the name was. And I heard Nathan mention needing a doctor, someone named Coleman, to sign off on some papers. Papers saying you're confused, not fit to manage your affairs. He squeezed my arm tighter. They're planning to get power of attorney, Harold. Or worse. They think you're losing it, and they're setting it up legally so they can take control. Power of attorney. Dr. Coleman. Confused. The words hit me like physical blows. Beatrice's comments about my memory, Nathan's relentless questions about my finances, the sudden trip to the pub. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. They weren't concerned. They were plotting. Just then, the front door opened, and Nathan walked back in, forcing a smile. All sorted, Dad. Sorry about that. He saw Gus standing close to me, Gus's hand still near my arm. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. Gus immediately straightened up, moving back to the taps. Another beer, Harold? He asked, his voice returning to its normal volume, but his eyes conveyed a silent warning. No. No thanks, Gus, I managed to say, my voice hoarse. My mind was reeling. I felt dizzy, sick. I needed to get away, needed time to think, needed to verify Gus's terrifying claims. You okay, Dad? Nathan asked again, sitting back down beside me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that now felt predatory. You look pale as a ghost. Just need the restroom, I stammered, pushing his hand away, perhaps a bit too abruptly. I stood up on shaky legs. Be right back. I turned and walked towards the back of the pub, forcing myself to move steadily, even though all I wanted to do was run. My own son, planning to strip me of everything. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, deep and agonizing. I had to get out of there. Now. Okay, here is Scene 4, continuing directly from the end of Scene 3, written in English, for an American audience focusing on Harold's escape. I pushed open the grimy door to the men's room and locked it behind me, leaning back against the wood, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The cheap lock felt flimsy, but it was the only barrier I had. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Gus's words echoed in the small, stale space. Power of attorney. Dr. Coleman. Confused. Not fit to manage your affairs. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a plan. A cold, calculated plan hatched by my own son and his wife to steal everything I had worked my entire life for. The betrayal was a physical ache, tightening my chest until it hurt to breathe. Nathan, my boy, the kid I taught to ride a bike, the young man I helped through college after Martha passed. How could he, Beatrice? I never fully trusted her. Her ambition always shone a little too brightly in her eyes. But Nathan, this cut deeper than any knife. I looked around the cramped restroom. A single cracked mirror above the stained sink reflected a pale 71-year-old man with fear in his eyes. Me. There was no other exit besides the door I came through, and Nathan was right outside, probably already wondering what was taking so long. Then I saw it. High up on the back wall above the toilet tank, a small, grimy window maybe 2 feet square. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years, paint peeling around the edges, dust thick on the sill. But it led outside, to the alleyway Gus had mentioned when he gave directions to the delivery guys once. Could I? I looked down at my hands, slightly trembling, looked at my reflection again. I wasn't young. My knees weren't what they used to be after decades hunched over engines in the shop. But sitting here waiting for Nathan to come knocking, waiting for them to spring their trap, that wasn't an option. Gus risked sticking his neck out to warn me. I owed it to him, to Martha's memory, and to myself to fight back. And the first step was getting out of here unseen. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the closed toilet lid. It wobbled precariously. I reached up, bracing one hand against the damp tiled wall. The window latch was rusted shut just as I'd feared. I fumbled with it, my fingers slipping on the corroded metal. Come on, come on! I put my shoulder into it, pushing upwards with all my remaining strength. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a grating screech that sounded deafeningly loud, in the small space the latch gave way. I held my breath, listening. Did anyone outside hear that? Only the muffled sounds of the bar. Music, indistinct chatter. Relief washed over me quickly, followed by renewed urgency. I carefully pushed the window outwards. It opened onto the dark, narrow alley behind the pub. The smell of damp brick and garbage drifted in. Freedom was just a few feet away. I looked down. The drop wasn't too bad, maybe 5-6 feet onto a pile of flattened cardboard boxes next to some overflowing dumpsters. Not ideal, but survivable. Better than facing Nathan right now. Better than walking into their web. Balancing awkwardly on the toilet, I hoisted myself up, grabbing the bottom edge of the window frame. My muscles screamed in protest. This was definitely harder than it looked. I swung one leg up and over the sill, scraping my shin against the rough wood. Pain shot up my leg, but I ignored it. I had to keep moving. I wriggled my torso through the opening, the frame digging into my ribs. My jacket snagged, just like I thought it might. I yanked it free, hearing a small tear. Doesn't matter. Halfway out, hanging precariously over the alley, I paused. What if Nathan came looking for me now? What if someone saw me? I glanced down the alley. Empty, except for the stray cat disappearing into the shadows. Taking another ragged breath, I pushed off the windowsill with my hands and let myself drop. I landed harder than I expected, the impact jarring my already aching joints. The cardboard cushioned the fall somewhat, but my left ankle twisted awkwardly underneath me. A sharp pain lanced through it. I gritted my teeth, stifling a groan. I couldn't afford to make noise. I couldn't afford to be injured. Not now. Slowly, carefully, I pushed myself up, testing my ankle. It hurt like hell, but I could put weight on it. Good enough. I dusted myself off the stench of rotting garbage clinging to my clothes. I was out. Hidden. Now what was Nathan really up to? I needed to see for myself. Sticking to the shadows, I limped towards the front of the alley, peering cautiously around the corner, towards the entrance of the Rusty Mug. Okay, here is Scene 5, continuing the story in English for an American audience aiming for approximately 1,200 words. I pressed myself flat against the cold, damp brick wall, the stench of stale beer and garbage thick in the air. My ankle throbbed with a dull ache, a painful reminder of my clumsy escape, but adrenaline kept the worst of it at bay. Peeking around the edge of the dumpster, I watched the front door of the Rusty Mug. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 30 seconds before Nathan burst out, looking visibly agitated. He scanned the street, his eyes narrowed, then pulled out his phone again. My own phone, tucked deep in my pocket on silent, vibrated faintly. I ignored it. He paced back and forth a couple of times, ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager stressed about exams. He muttered something under his breath, looked like a curse, then jammed the phone back into his pocket. He glanced towards where his own car was parked down the street. Hesitated, then turned sharply and started walking quickly in the opposite direction towards the darker end of the block. Not towards his car. Strange. Where was he going? My mind raced. Gus's warning. The lawyer. The doctor. This wasn't just a casual drink. This was part of something bigger, something sinister. I had to know. Ignoring the pain in my ankle, I pushed myself away from the wall and started following him, keeping to the shadows of the doorways and parked cars along the street. It wasn't easy. My 71-year-old legs weren't built for stealth, and the limp from my ankle made me clumsy. But years of working quietly around heavy machinery, of needing to be aware of my surroundings, had taught me a thing or two about moving without drawing attention. Nathan didn't look back. He seemed preoccupied, almost frantic, walking with his head down, shoulders hunched. He reached the corner where the streetlights cast long, distorted shadows. A sleek black sedan I didn't recognize was parked there, engine idling softly, exhaust fumes pluming in the cooling afternoon air. The driver's side window was tinted, hiding whoever was inside. Nathan went straight to the rear passenger door, opened it, and slid in without a word. The door clicked shut. My breath hitched. This was definitely not his usual ride. This looked expensive, professional. I quickly memorized the license plate. GZT 481. GZT 481. I repeated it in my head, burning it into my memory. The sedan pulled smoothly away from the curb, its taillights disappearing around the next corner. I couldn't just stand there. Limping out onto the sidewalk, I scanned the street desperately. Luck was with me. A yellow taxi was dropping off a passenger just half a block down. I waved frantically, ignoring the sharp twinge in my ankle as I hurried towards it. Taxi, taxi. The cabbie, a middle-aged guy chewing gum with weary eyes, waited patiently as I clambered into the back seat. "Where do pal see that black sedan that just turned the corner?" I pointed, breathing heavily. "The one with plate GZT 481. He squinted. "Yeah, I think so. What about it?" "Follow it," I said, trying to sound calm, authoritative. "But keep your distance. Don't let them know we're tailing them. It's important." The driver gave me a long look in the rearview mirror, probably sizing me up, wondering if I was trouble. Maybe he thought I was some jealous husband or a private eye. He shrugged, popped his gum. "Whatever you say, boss. Your dime." He put the car in gear and pulled out, turning the corner the sedan had taken. My heart pounded against my ribs. What was I doing, chasing my own son through the city like some kind of spy? It felt surreal, like a bad dream. But Gus's words, Nathan's strange behavior, the expensive car, it all pointed to something deeply wrong. I had to see this through. We trailed the black sedan through the late afternoon traffic. It moved purposefully, heading away from the familiar downtown area and into a less glamorous district filled with older office buildings and warehouses. Whoever Nathan was meeting, it wasn't at his usual upscale haunts. The driver was good, keeping a couple of cars between us, never getting too close. Inside the sedan, I could just make out the silhouette of Nathan in the back seat, occasionally gesturing, maybe talking on the phone again. After about 15 minutes, the sedan signaled and turned onto a quiet side street, lined with slightly run-down, 3-story brick buildings housing small businesses, accountants, insurance agents, maybe a dentist or two. It pulled up and parked in front of one building, midway down the block. The sign above the door was discreet, almost faded: Finch and Associates. Legal Services. Finch. The name Gus had mentioned. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. "Stop here," I told the driver, quickly pointing to a spot across the street and a little further down, partially hidden by a delivery van. "Wait for me, please. Keep the meter running. I needed a way out if things went bad." "Got it," the driver said, pulling over smoothly. I watched intently from the back seat of the taxi. The driver of the black sedan got out first. He was a man in his 50s, wearing a sharp, slightly flashy suit. His dark hair was slicked back, and he had a thin, unpleasant smile fixed on his face as he held the rear door open. This had to be Finch. Nathan emerged from the car, looking less agitated now, more focused, almost determined. He adjusted his tie. Finch clapped him on the shoulder, and they started walking towards the office entrance, talking animatedly. I needed to hear what they were saying. Carefully, I opened the taxi door and slipped out, staying low behind the delivery van. The street was mostly deserted at this time of day. Finch and Nathan had paused right at the doorway, keys in Finch's hand. The wind had died down slightly, and their voices carried across the quiet street, sharp and clear in the crisp air. "So the power of attorney paperwork is all drafted, ready to go," Finch was saying, tapping a thick manila envelope he held. His voice was smooth, confident. "Excellent," Nathan replied, and I could hear the relief, the satisfaction in his tone. It made my skin crawl. "Just need the old man to sign on the dotted line now." Finch chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Shouldn't be too hard given the circumstances. And Dr. Coleman will sign off on the medical assessment Monday morning. Standard procedure." He winked. "Confirms for legal purposes that he's not quite all there anymore. A bit confused. Makes the whole transition smoother, protects you. Confused. Not quite all there." They were building their case, manufacturing evidence. My evidence. Against me. "Beatrice will be thrilled," Nathan said, a grin spreading across his face. "She's been getting impatient. Says it's about time we secured our future. This plan is perfect." "Perfect indeed," Finch agreed, inserting the key into the lock. "Once you have control, managing his assets will be a breeze. Liquidate what you need, reinvest the rest. Discreetly, of course." They both laughed, then a shared conspiratorial sound that echoed sickeningly in the quiet street, before they disappeared inside the building, the door clicking shut behind them. I leaned heavily against the cold metal of the delivery van, the world spinning around me. Nausea rose in my throat. It was true. All of it. Gus hadn't misunderstood. He hadn't exaggerated. My son, my Nathan, was actively plotting with a crooked lawyer and a corrupt doctor to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal my money, my house, everything Martha and I had worked for. Beatrice wasn't just influencing him. She was a driving force, impatient to get her hands on my assets. Secured their future by destroying mine. The cold wasn't just in the air anymore. It seeped into my bones, a chilling realization of the depth of their betrayal. The pain in my ankle was nothing compared to the agony ripping through my chest. I felt utterly alone, vulnerable, and incredibly foolish for having been so blind for so long. How could I have missed it? How could I have raised a son capable of this? But the questions didn't matter now. What mattered was what I did next. I couldn't go back to Nathan's house. I couldn't go back to my own house yet. They might be watching it, waiting for me. I needed a safe place, a place to think, a place to plan. Because this wasn't just about protecting my money anymore. This was about fighting for my life, my sanity, my very identity. They had started this war, but I would be damned if I let them win without a fight. I stumbled out of the taxi in front of the Starlight Motel, a faded sign flickering weakly against the twilight sky. It wasn't much to look at. Peeling paint, a few missing letters on the sign, a parking lot, mostly empty except for a couple of beat-up trucks. The air smelled vaguely of exhaust fumes and stale cooking oil. This was a far cry from my neat, comfortable home, but right now anonymity was the only luxury I craved. The man behind the plexiglass partition at the check-in barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle. One night he grunted. "Yes." "Mary Smith," I said, sliding cash across the counter. No credit cards, no paper trail. He handed me a key attached to a worn plastic tag. Room 207, without another word. Upstairs, the hallway carpet was stained and threadbare. Room 207 was small, cramped, and smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and desperation. A lumpy double bed covered with a thin, questionable floral bedspread took up most of the space. A small, bolted-down television sat silently on a cheap particle board dresser. The single window looked out onto the noisy main road. It wasn't home, but it was safe. for now. I locked the door, slid the chain across, and wedged the room's rickety chair under the knob for good measure. Then I sank onto the edge of the lumpy bed, the springs groaning in protest. The reality of what I had seen, what I had heard outside Finch's office, crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. Nathan, my son, conspiring with a sleazy lawyer and a crooked doctor. Power of attorney. Dr. Coleman, confused, not fit to manage your affairs. Beatrice will be thrilled. Plan is perfect. The words spun in my head, a nauseating vortex of betrayal. They weren't just planning for the future. They were actively plotting to steal mine. To strip me of my independence, my dignity, my home, everything Martha and I had built together, piece by painstaking piece. How could he? The boy I taught to fish, the teenager. I stayed up late helping with homework. The young man whose wedding I proudly paid for. Had it all been a lie? Was this greed always lurking beneath the surface, hidden behind his easy smiles and occasional gestures of affection? Or had Beatrice twisted him, feeding his insecurities, stoking his resentment, painting me as an obstacle to their grand ambitions? Maybe it was both. Maybe it didn't matter. The result was the same. My own flesh and blood saw me as nothing more than a bank account, to be drained and inconvenienced to be managed, perhaps even eliminated from the equation altogether, by declaring me incompetent. A wave of grief washed over me so sharp, it felt like Martha had died all over again. What would she think? She had adored Nathan, always made excuses for his shortcomings, always believed in his fundamental goodness. He just needs time to mature, Harold, she used to say. He has a good heart underneath it all. Had we both been wrong? Had we raised a monster without realizing it? The guilt gnawed at me. Maybe I had been too lenient, too quick to bail him out of trouble, too trusting. Maybe this was somehow my fault. No. I shook my head, pushing the self-blame away. This wasn't my fault. This was their choice, their greed, their betrayal, and sitting here wallowing in guilt and despair wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't protect me. It wouldn't honor Martha's memory. Anger began to replace the initial shock and sadness. A cold, hard anger that settled deep in my gut. They thought I was a confused old man, an easy target. They thought they could roll right over me with their lawyers and their fabricated medical reports. They underestimated me. They underestimated Harold Miller. I might be 71, but my mind was sharp, and my will was forged in the fires of hard work and loss. I wouldn't go down without a fight. Okay, Harold. Think. What do you need? First, allies. People I could trust. Second, a plan. A solid legal plan. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out my worn leather wallet. Tucked in the back behind my driver's license and a faded picture of Martha was a small folded piece of paper, my emergency contact list written out years ago in case something happened to me. Old habits. I scanned the names and numbers, my finger stopping on 2. Pete Johnson, my oldest friend. Solid as a rock. And Robert Davies, attorney at law. The man who handled Martha's will with quiet competence and integrity. My hands were still trembling slightly, but my resolve was hardening. I pulled out my simple flip phone, none of those complicated smartphones Nathan kept trying to give me, and dialed Pete's number first. He answered on the second ring, his voice booming through the small speaker. Pete Johnson speaking. Pete, it's Harold. I kept my voice low, glancing nervously at the motel room door. Harold, where the devil have you been? Nathan called me half an hour ago, Frantic said. You disappeared from the pub, said he was worried sick. Thought you might have gotten confused or fallen confused. The words sent another jolt of anger through me. Nathan was already laying the groundwork, painting the picture of a senile old man. Pete, listen carefully, I said, cutting him off. I'm fine. I'm safe. But I need your help, urgently. And you absolutely cannot tell Nathan or anyone else that I called you or where I am, understand? There was a pause. Pete wasn't stupid. He knew me. Understood Harold. What's going on? You sound spooked. It's Nathan, Pete, and Beatrice. They're trying to do something terrible. Involving lawyers, doctors, my money, my house. They think I'm losing my mind. Pete swore loudly. That no good. I never trusted that wife of his. What do you need me to do, Harold? Just say the word. His immediate loyalty was a balm to my raw nerves. Can you meet me right now, somewhere private? I need to tell you everything. You bet. Dottie's Diner down on 5th Street, back booth. It's usually dead this time of evening. I can be there in 20 minutes. Perfect. Thanks, Pete. And remember, absolute secrecy. My lips are sealed, Harold. See you soon. I hung up feeling a fraction of the weight lift off my chest. Pete was in my corner. Now for the lawyer. I found Robert Davies's number and dialed his office line, hoping someone was still there after hours, or that he had an answering service. To my relief, a calm, professional voice answered after a few rings. Davies Law Office, how may I help you? Yes, my name is Harold Miller. I'm a former client of Mr. Davies. I need to speak with him urgently regarding a very serious and time-sensitive legal matter. Mr. Davies has left for the day, Mr. Miller. Can I take a message or schedule an appointment for tomorrow? Tomorrow might be too late, I said, trying to convey the urgency without sounding panicked. Is there any way to reach him tonight? It concerns potential fraud and undue influence regarding my estate. The secretary paused. Let me see what I can do, Mr. Miller. This sounds important. Can you hold for a moment? I waited, listening to the bland hold music, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. After what felt like an age, she came back on the line. Mr. Miller, Mr. Davies can see you first thing tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. He said, given the nature of your call, he'll clear his schedule. Will that work? Yes. Yes, that will work perfectly. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Mr. Miller. We'll see you at 8. I hung up, slumping back onto the bed. Okay. Steps taken. Allies contacted. A legal shield being put in place. I wasn't alone anymore. But the image of Nathan's smiling face outside the lawyer's office, the cold calculation in his voice on Gus's recording, it sent another wave of sickness through me. Tomorrow the fight would begin in earnest. Tonight I needed to rest, gather my strength, and prepare for the battle of my life. A battle against my own son. Dottie's Diner was exactly as Pete described it, quiet, almost empty. The smell of old coffee and frying bacon hung heavy in the air. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the cracked linoleum floor and the red vinyl booths. I slid into the back booth. Pete had suggested, the one tucked away in the corner, offering the most privacy. My hands felt cold, clammy, despite the lukewarm coffee the waitress had poured. Every time the bell above the door jingled, my head snapped up, half expecting Nathan or Beatrice to walk in, their faces contorted with rage. Paranoia, maybe, or maybe just a healthy dose of self-preservation kicking in. Exactly 20 minutes after my call, the bell jingled again, and Pete pushed through the door. He scanned the diner, his eyes landing on me in the back. Relief washed over me, seeing his familiar weathered face. Pete was built like a retired dock worker, solid and dependable, with kind eyes wrinkled at the corners from years of smiling, though right now those eyes held nothing but concern. He lumbered over, sliding into the booth opposite me. Harold. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, his voice low. What in God's name is going on? Nathan sounded completely panicked on the phone. The waitress came over. Pete ordered black coffee, waved away the menu. Once she was out of earshot, he leaned forward, his gaze intense. All right, spill it. What's Nathan done now? I took a deep breath. Saying it out loud, admitting the ugly truth about my own son, felt like another betrayal. But I had no choice. Pete, it's bad. Really bad. I started with the strained atmosphere at Nathan's house, Beatrice's pointed comments about my memory. Then I told him about the sudden trip to the Rusty Mug, Nathan's probing questions about my finances. Pete listened patiently, nodding his brow furrowed. Sounds like typical Nathan and Beatrice behavior, always sniffing around your money. Annoying, but nothing new. No, Pete, this was different. My voice dropped to a whisper. When Nathan stepped out to take that fake phone call. Gus, the bartender, he warned me. I recounted Gus's words, the overheard conversations, the lawyer named Finch, the doctor named Coleman, the plan to get power of attorney by claiming I was confused, unfit. Pete's jaw tightened. His usual ruddy complexion deepened. Gus said that Gus wouldn't lie about something like this. He shook his head slowly, disbelief warring with anger on his face. Power of attorney, declare you incompetent. Harold, that's beyond low. It gets worse, Pete. I told him about my escape through the restroom window, the sharp pain in my ankle still a dull throb. I described following Nathan, seeing the expensive black sedan, tailing it across town to the lawyer's office. Pete leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists on the tabletop. You followed him. Good God, Harold, be careful. I had to know, I whispered. And I saw him, Pete, with the lawyer Finch, right there on the street. I heard them talking. I repeated the fragments I'd overheard. Power of attorney ready. Dr. Coleman signs Monday. Old man just needs to sign. Beatrice will be thrilled. Plan is perfect. Pete slammed his fist softly on the table, making the coffee cups jump. Damn them, damn that greedy pair, he growled, his voice thick with fury. After everything you've done for that boy, after Martha, she'd be heartbroken. And that Beatrice, I always knew she was poison wrapping Nathan around her little finger. His anger mirrored my own, validating the storm raging inside me. It felt good not to be alone with this terrible knowledge. They think I'm just a confused old fool they can push aside, I said, the bitterness rising in my throat. They're already setting it up, Pete. Nathan was telling people I got confused and wandered off from the pub. The nerve, Pete leaned back, running a hand over his face. Okay, Harold. Okay. We need to think. What did you do then? I checked into a cheap motel under a fake name. Called you. I'm meeting a lawyer tomorrow morning, Robert Davies, the one who handled Martha's will. Davies. Good man. Sharp. Honest. That's the right move. Pete nodded, his mind clearly working. But this Finch character and Dr. Coleman, that sounds crooked as hell. We need to know more about them. Let me ask around, Harold. You know, I hear things. I know people who know people. I bet I can find out if Finch has a reputation for this kind of dirty work, or if Coleman's known for signing anything for a price. Would you, Pete? That would be incredibly helpful. But be careful. If Nathan or Beatrice find out you're asking questions, Pete snorted. Let them try. What are they going to do, sue me for gossiping? He leaned forward again, his expression deadly serious. Listen to me, Harold. You're not alone in this. Not while I'm still breathing. Whatever you need, someone to watch your house, run errands, anything, you call me, day or night. Understand, tears pricked the back of my eyes, a surprising surge of emotion. After the shock and the fear, Pete's unwavering loyalty felt like a lifeline. Thank you, Pete. Really, I don't know what I'd do without you right now. Forget about it, Pete waved a dismissive hand, though his eyes were kind. That's what friends are for. Now finish your coffee. We need to keep our strength up. And Harold, yeah, don't you dare let those vultures see you sweat. Act normal if you have to talk to Nathan. Play confused if it buys you time, just like your lawyer will probably tell you. We'll get the bastards. We'll expose them. I managed a small, grim smile. Yeah, Pete. We will. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, the unspoken understanding passing between us, the road ahead was going to be ugly, painful, tearing my family apart. But for the first time since Gus grabbed my arm in the pub, I didn't feel completely adrift. I had a friend. I had a lawyer meeting scheduled. And I had the truth, however horrifying, finally starting to come into focus. The fight was just beginning. 8 a.m. sharp. I was standing outside the polished oak door of Davy's law office, the engraved brass plate gleaming softly in the early morning light. My reflection stared back. Tired eyes, lines etched deeper by worry, but a certain hardness around the jaw I hadn't seen before. I took a steadying breath and pushed the door open. The reception area was quiet, tasteful. Plush carpets muffled my footsteps. A young woman looked up from her computer with a polite smile. Mr. Harold Miller. Yes, I have an 8 o'clock appointment with Mr. Davies. Right this way, Mr. Miller. He's expecting you. She led me down a short hallway to a corner office. Robert Davies stood up from behind a large mahogany desk as I entered, extending a hand. He hadn't changed much in the 5 years since he handled Martha's affairs. Mid-60s, maybe salt and pepper hair neatly combed, wearing a well-tailored but conservative suit. His handshake was firm, his eyes clear and direct. They held a look of quiet intelligence and integrity that had reassured me back then, and did so again now. Harold, good to see you, though. I wish it were under better circumstances, he said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the comfortable leather chairs facing his desk. My secretary mentioned it was urgent. Potential fraud. Worse than that, Robert, I said, my voice thick. Much worse. He sat down, folded his hands on the desk, and gave me his full attention. All right, Harold. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out, no matter how small it seems. And so I did. I started with the awkward visit to Nathan and Beatrice's house, their subtle comments about my health and finances. I described the uncomfortable atmosphere at the Rusty Mug, Nathan's relentless probing about managing my affairs. Then came Gus's warning, the names, Finch Coleman, the chilling plan to have me declared unfit. I recounted my escape through the restroom window, the throbbing pain in my ankle, the desperate taxi ride across town. I described following Nathan, seeing the black sedan, the meeting with Finch, the overheard fragments confirming their conspiracy. Power of attorney, the doctor's sign-off, Beatrice's impatience. I told him about checking into the motel under a fake name, the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I also mentioned calling my friend Pete Johnson, and Pete's initial findings about Finch's shady reputation, and rumors about Dr. Coleman. Davies listened intently throughout, making precise notes on a legal pad. He didn't interrupt, his expression growing increasingly grave as I spoke. The only outward sign of his reaction was the slight tightening of his lips and the occasional thoughtful stroke of his chin. When I finally finished, the silence in the office felt heavy. He looked down at his notes for a long moment, then met my gaze. Harold, he said, his voice calm but serious. This is extremely disturbing. What you're describing isn't just a family dispute over money. If Gus's information and your observations are accurate, and I have no reason to doubt them, this constitutes a deliberate conspiracy to commit fraud, likely involving undue influence and potentially elder abuse through financial exploitation and psychological manipulation. Hearing the cold legal terms laid out so starkly made it even more real, more terrifying. What can they actually do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Legally, Davies leaned forward. If they can convince a doctor, in this case the potentially compromised Dr. Coleman, to declare you mentally incompetent, and if they can somehow coerce or trick you into signing a durable power of attorney naming Nathan as your agent, they could gain significant control over your finances and property. In a worst-case scenario, they could petition the court for guardianship based on fraudulent medical evidence, effectively stripping you of your right to make your own decisions. My blood ran cold, stripped of my rights, locked away, while they spent my life savings. Can they succeed? It's harder than they might think, especially if we act quickly and decisively. Davies reassured me. But we can't underestimate them. People motivated by financial desperation can be ruthless. The fact that they've involved a lawyer like Finch and are apparently trying to procure a fraudulent medical assessment shows they're serious. He tapped his pen on the pad. Okay, first things first. We need to secure your assets immediately. Does Nathan currently have any access to your bank accounts, joint accounts? Is his name on your house deed? No, I said firmly. Martha and I always kept our finances separate from the kids after they grew up. He's not on any accounts. The house is solely in my name, paid in full years ago. Excellent. That simplifies things considerably. Davies made another note. First step, I want you to go to your bank today. Speak only to the manager if possible. Inform them, discreetly, that you suspect unauthorized attempts might be made to access your accounts or change information. Put a verbal security alert on everything. Change your passwords if you use online banking. I will also draft a formal letter for you whom to deliver reinforcing this and revoking any prior permissions Nathan might claim to have, however informal. Okay, I can do that. Second, Davies continued, we need concrete evidence against Finch and Coleman. Your friend Pete's inquiries are a good start. We need proof of Finch's history with similar cases and any official records regarding disciplinary actions against Coleman. Witness testimony is crucial. Gus, the bartender, is key. Would he be willing to make a formal statement, perhaps even testify if needed? I think so, I said. Gus is a straight shooter. He seemed genuinely angry about what Nathan was doing. Good. I can have an investigator discreetly contact him. We also need that appointment slip Gus found. That's physical evidence linking Nathan to Coleman and their plan regarding your mental state. He paused. Third, I will immediately draft a document formally revoking any potential power of attorney Nathan might claim exists or try to create. We'll have it notarized and keep copies on file. If he ever produces a document supposedly signed by you, we'll be prepared to challenge its validity based on undue influence, coercion, and your proven mental competence at this time. I nodded, feeling a small measure of control returning. Davies was thorough, methodical. Now, Harold, Davies leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. Let's talk about long-term protection. You mentioned handling Martha's will 5 years ago. Did we discuss any other estate planning measures at that time? Protecting assets, ensuring your wishes were clearly defined. I frowned, trying to remember. We mostly focused on the will, making sure Nathan was the beneficiary, dividing up personal items. Martha was sick, then it was all a bit of a blur. Davies tapped his pen again. Right. But I seem to recall, yes, here it is in my notes from back then. He pulled out an older file from his drawer, flipping through it. After Martha passed, you came back a few months later. You were concerned about ensuring Nathan would be taken care of, but also about protecting the bulk of your estate from, let's say, unforeseen circumstances, or perhaps poor decisions down the line. You wanted to honor Martha's wish that part of your savings eventually go to the children's hospital she volunteered at. My eyes widened slightly. I remembered now. A conversation born from grief and a vague unease even back then. Yes, I think I remember something like that. We set up some kind of trust. Exactly. Davies confirmed, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. An irrevocable living trust. You transferred ownership of your house and the majority of your investment accounts into the trust 5 years ago. As the trustee, you still control everything during your lifetime. But legally, those assets are owned by the trust, not by you personally. I stared at him, the full implication dawning on me slowly. So, even if Nathan got power of attorney, even if he somehow got power of attorney over you, Davies clarified, he wouldn't automatically gain control over the assets held within the trust. The trust has its own rules, its own designated successor trustee, which, if I recall, is the bank's trust department, not Nathan, and specific instructions for distribution after your passing. He consulted his notes again. Ah, yes. After specific bequests, the primary beneficiary of the trust residue is the Children's Hospital Foundation. Nathan is named as a secondary beneficiary, entitled to receive a percentage only after the hospital's share and explicitly conditional upon him, demonstrating financial stability and responsible management of his own affairs for a period of 1 year prior to distribution. Payments would be at the discretion of the successor trustee. A slow smile spread across my face, the first genuine smile in what felt like days. Irrevocable. Conditional. Primary beneficiary is the hospital. Nathan wouldn't get his hands on the bulk of it easily, maybe not at all if he couldn't prove he was responsible. Martha would have liked that. I had almost forgotten the details, the power of that document we created in the quiet months after her death. So their whole plan, I began. Their plan to gain immediate control of your house and savings through a power of attorney or guardianship is fundamentally flawed regarding the trust assets, Davies finished. They likely don't know about the trust or don't understand its legal implications. They're probably operating under the assumption everything is still directly in your name. He allowed himself a small professional smile. You were wiser than you perhaps realized 5 years ago, Harold. Relief profound and deep washed over me. It wasn't a complete solution. They could still try to control my pension, my personal checking account, make my life miserable. But the core of my assets, the house Martha loved, the nest egg we built, was protected. So what now? I asked, feeling stronger, more grounded. Now, Davies said, leaning forward again. We use this advantage. We let them think their plan is progressing. We need more concrete evidence of their conspiracy, especially Finch and Coleman's direct involvement. Your cooperation, or seeming cooperation, is key. You want me to play along? To an extent. Don't sign anything, obviously, but don't immediately confront them or reveal what you know, especially about the trust. If Nathan calls continue to sound a bit vague, maybe slightly forgetful, but agreeable to discussing the power of attorney. Tell him you need time to read it over, that you want your own lawyer. Maybe invent a name, not me, to look at it first. Stall them. Buy us time. And while you're stalling, I'll finalize the legal protections. My investigator will talk to Gus and dig deeper into Finch and Coleman, and Pete can continue his inquiries. We need irrefutable proof before we make our move. We want to catch them in the act, preferably attempting to use fraudulent documents or making explicit threats based on the fake medical assessment. It felt deceitful playing games with my own son. But Nathan had started this game. He and Beatrice had chosen the rules. Now I had to play smarter. I can do that, I said, my voice steady now. I can play the confused old man for a little while longer if it means catching them red-handed. Good. Davies nodded, closing the file. Stay in touch, Harold. Call me immediately if they try to force you to sign anything, or if Dr. Coleman shows up unannounced. Use a burner phone if you're worried about them tracking your calls. And be careful. I stood up, shaking his hand again. Thank you, Robert. For everything. Just doing my job, Harold. Now go to the bank, secure those accounts, and let's start turning the tables on these vultures. I walked out of Davies' law office feeling like a different man than the one who had stumbled out of the Rusty Muggs alleyway less than 24 hours ago. The shock and grief were still there, a heavy weight in my chest. But now they were mixed with something else, grim determination, a clear plan, and the surprising potent weapon of an irrevocable trust they knew nothing about. The game was far from over, but the board had just been reset. I was back in my own house now, the Starlight Motel, feeling like a distant, unpleasant dream. It felt good to be surrounded by familiar things, Martha's picture on the mantelpiece, the worn armchair she loved. But the house felt different too, tainted by the knowledge of Nathan and Beatrice's plans. I moved cautiously, checking locks, peering out windows. Were they watching? Had they been here? Pete had checked earlier and said everything looked normal, but the unease lingered. I'd gone to the bank as Davies advised, put alerts on my accounts, changed what few online passwords I had. Felt like a small victory, but the war was far from over. Around mid-morning, my phone rang. Caller ID showed Nathan's number. Here we go. I took a breath, reminding myself of Davy's advice: play vague stall for time. I let it ring twice before answering, trying to sound a little slow, maybe slightly out of breath. Hello, Dad. Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Nathan's voice was a rush of feigned relief and anxiety. Where did you go yesterday? I was worried sick. I came back to the table at the pub, and you were gone. I called Pete, called your house. Nobody knew where you were. Beatrice and I barely slept. Right? Worried sick about losing control of my assets, more likely. Oh. Nathan, I said, injecting a note of mild confusion into my voice. Sorry, son. I suddenly felt very tired. That drive, I guess. Decided to just, head home and lie down. Must have forgotten to tell you. Head's been a bit fuzzy lately. There was a pause on Nathan's end. I could almost hear the gears turning, him thinking, fuzzy good, perfect. Then he replied, his tone shifting to one of exaggerated sympathy. Oh, Dad, see, that's exactly what I mean. That's why Beatrice and I worry. It's easy to get overwhelmed or forget things when you're tired. You shouldn't have just wandered off like that. What if something had happened? I'm all right, Nathan. Just needed to rest, I mumbled, playing the part. Well, I'm glad you're okay, he said, the relief sounding slightly more genuine now, probably because he thought his plan was still on track. Listen, Dad, about what we were talking about. Before you went to the restroom yesterday, about simplifying things, making sure you're taken care of. Here it comes. The power of attorney, Yeah, I think I remember something about that, I said vaguely. Good. Well, I had my lawyer, Mr. Finch, the one who helps me with business stuff. He drafted up some simple papers. Just a standard power of attorney. It basically just lets me help you with bills and things if you ever need it, or if you know you're not feeling up to handling paperwork yourself. Makes things easier for everyone. He made it sound so reasonable, so helpful, like offering to mow the lawn. Power of attorney. I repeated slowly as if trying to grasp the concept. Sounds complicated. Not at all, Dad. It's really straightforward. Finch explained it all. It's just a precaution, really. For your peace of mind, knowing things are handled. He sounded so earnest, so convincing. If I didn't know better, I might have believed him. Well, I don't know, Nathan. I began, letting my voice trail off uncertainly. Dad, it's just signing a paper? He urged, a hint of impatience creeping in despite his efforts. It doesn't mean anything changes right now. It's just for the future. In case. We wouldn't want you struggling with forms or forgetting a payment, would we? He was pushing, using my feigned fuzziness against me. Let me see the papers first, son, I said, stalling as Davies instructed. My eyesight isn't what it used to be. Need my reading glasses. And maybe I should have my own, fellow. Look them over. Just to make sure I understand everything. I deliberately avoided saying lawyer. Nathan hesitated. I could feel his frustration crackling over the line. He probably wanted this done yesterday. Your own fellow? Who, Dad? You don't really deal with lawyers much, do you? He sounded suspicious. Oh, just, old Jim from the VFW post. I improvised quickly, thinking of a guy I barely knew. He used to be a paralegal or something. Smart fella. Always good to get a second opinion, right? There was another pause. Nathan was likely weighing his options. Push harder and risk spooking me, or back off and let me think I was in control. He chose the latter. Okay, Dad. Okay, he said, his voice smoothing out again. If that makes you feel better. Sure. I can drop the papers off later today. You take your time. Read them over with. Jim. He almost spat the name out. Just don't take too long, okay? It's better to get these things sorted sooner rather than later. All right, son. All right. I'll look at them when you bring them over, I said, sounding tired but agreeable. Great, Dad. That's great. Knew you'd see it makes sense. He sounded relieved, confident again. He thought he had me. He thought the confused old man was just being cautious, but would ultimately sign. Okay, well, I gotta run. Meeting. Just glad you're okay. Call me if you need anything. All right? Okay, Nathan. Bye now. I hung up the phone, my hand surprisingly steady. The act had worked. I had bought myself time. Time for Davies to work, time for Pete and Gus to dig, time for me to prepare. Nathan thought he was playing me, but he had no idea he was walking right into a trap I hadn't even known existed until yesterday. The irrevocable trust, my secret weapon. Let him bring the papers. Let Finch and Coleman think they were closing in. Their confidence would be their downfall. The call from Pete came later that afternoon, just as I was starting to pace the worn carpet of my living room, like a caged animal. Seeing his name on the caller ID, I snatched the phone up. Pete. What did you find out? Bingo, Harold. Pete's voice crackled with a grim satisfaction. Looks like your gut feeling was dead on about those two snakes. My heart rate picked up. Tell me. Okay, so Finch the lawyer. Word is he's slick, handles messy divorces, questionable real estate deals, anything where the lines get blurry. Got a reputation for finding loopholes, maybe even creating them. Not exactly Mr. Clean. Couple of guys I know who dealt with him said they wouldn't trust him further than they could throw him. Said he's all about the money, ethics optional. Ethics optional. Sounded about right. And Coleman, the doctor. That one's interesting, Pete continued. Took a bit more digging. He's got a private practice, neurology or psychiatry, something like that. But here's the kicker: about 7 years ago, he got an official reprimand from the state medical board. Something about improper patient assessments, signing off on paperwork, without thorough examinations, particularly in competency cases involving seniors. Wasn't enough to lose his license, but it's a big red flag, Harold. It means he's done questionable stuff like this before. A reprimand. For exactly the kind of thing they were planning. It fit perfectly, sickeningly so. So he's willing to sign papers saying I'm incompetent, probably for a price, even without examining me. Looks that way, Pete confirmed. He's got a history. Finch probably knows, it knows he's pliable. You got yourself a real nasty pair there, Harold. A cold dread mixed with the anger. They weren't just opportunistic. They were using professionals with compromised ethics to build their fraudulent case. Thanks, Pete. This helps. A lot. Keep your ears open, okay? Anything else you hear? You got it, Harold. Anything. And you watch your back. These guys play dirty. I hung up, staring at the phone. Finch's reputation. Coleman's history. It confirmed the conspiracy was real, professional, and dangerous. But I needed more. I needed something concrete linking Nathan directly to this plot, something tangible I could show Davies. Gus. He mentioned Nathan meeting Finch at the pub. And something about a dropped paper. My mind flashed back to Gus's hurried whisper. I needed to talk to him again, away from prying ears, get the full story. Waiting until the late afternoon lull when the rusty mug would be mostly empty between the lunch crowd and the evening regulars, I drove back over there. My ankle still protested, but I ignored it. Walking into the familiar dimness felt strange now, knowing the secret the place held. Gus was behind the bar, polishing glasses, same as always. Only a couple of old-timers nursed beers at the far end. Gus looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. Harold. Back so soon, I glanced around. Gus, can we talk somewhere private about yesterday? He nodded slowly, wiping his hands on his apron. Yeah. Thought you might come back." He gestured towards a door behind the bar marked office. "In here. It's cramped, but no one will bother us." I followed him into a small, cluttered room smelling of stale beer and paperwork. Piles of invoices overflowed from a metal desk. Gus closed the door firmly. "All right, Harold. What's on your mind?" "Though I think I know. Yesterday I started my voice low. You warned me about Nathan and Beatrice. About Finch and Coleman. I need to know everything you heard, Gus. Everything you saw. It's worse than I thought." Gus leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. He sighed heavily. "Yeah, I figured. Look, Harold, I've known you a long time. Known Nathan since he was a kid stealing pretzels off the bar. It ain't easy saying this about your own son, but he's changed. Or maybe that wife of his changed him." "What did you hear specifically?" I pressed gently. "It's been bits and pieces over the last few months," Gus said, frowning in concentration. "They come in here sometimes, usually when it's slow. Beatrice does most of the talking, complaining. Always complaining. About money, mostly. How you're sitting on a gold mine with your house. How you don't need all that money at your age. How it's unfair Nathan has to wait." His imitation of Beatrice's sharp tone was chillingly accurate. My stomach churned. Sitting on a gold mine. "And Nathan?" I asked quietly. "He just goes along with it," Gus said, shaking his head. Nods, agrees, sometimes adds fuel to the fire. Complains about having to manage you, about how you're getting forgetful. It always rubbed me the wrong way, Harold. You're sharp as a tack. And the meetings with Finch, yeah. "Those were weird," Gus confirmed. "Maybe 3 times in the last month or so. Nathan would come in, order a drink, look real nervous. Then this Finch guy shows up, slides into the booth with him. They talk real low, heads close together, passing papers back and forth sometimes. Always looked like shady business to me, not like regular lawyer stuff." "Did you hear anything they said?" "Not much." Gus admitted. "They were careful, but I caught phrases. Heard Finch mention capacity assessment. Heard Nathan say something about making it look legitimate. Heard Beatrice's name a lot. It felt wrong, Harold. Like they were plotting something behind your back." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "Then the last time Finch was here, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, something happened." My breath caught. "What?" "They were in the back booth, same as usual. Finch left first. Nathan stayed a minute longer, gathered his papers, looked flustered. When he got up, he dropped one. A small slip of paper fluttered under the table. He didn't notice, just hurried out. A slip of paper. My heart started pounding. "Yeah." Gus nodded. "I went over to clean the table after he left, saw it lying there. Picked it up. Was going to run after him, but he'd already driven off. I looked at it, Harold, and, well, it gave me the creeps." "What was it, Gus?" "What did it say?" I urged, leaning forward. Gus reached into the pocket of his apron and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was slightly crumpled, looked like standard medical appointment card stock. He unfolded it carefully and handed it to me. My hands trembled as I took it. It was an appointment reminder card from a clinic I didn't recognize. Coleman Neurological and Psychiatric Services. Dr. Alan Coleman. The name Finch had mentioned. The name Pete confirmed had a history of questionable competency assessments. But it wasn't the doctor's name that made my blood freeze. It was the patient's name clearly typed on the line Harold Miller, and the appointment details Monday, November 3rd, just a few days away, 10 a.m. Purpose of visit, cognitive capacity evaluation. I stared at the slip, the black letters blurring in front of my eyes. A capacity evaluation. Scheduled by Nathan using Coleman, the compromised doctor. They hadn't even waited for me to agree. They were moving forward with their plan, ready to get the fraudulent assessment signed, likely to be used alongside the power of attorney they were trying to trick me into signing, or worse, to petition a court for guardianship. This slip of paper wasn't just a clue. It was hard evidence. Physical proof of their premeditated conspiracy. I kept it, Gus said quietly, watching my face. Didn't know what to do with it. Felt wrong throwing it away. Felt wrong giving it back to Nathan after what I suspected. Then you came in yesterday, and Nathan acted so weird, and then you disappeared. I knew I had to tell you, had to give you this. I looked up from the paper, meeting Gus's steady gaze. He hadn't just overheard gossip. He had found the smoking gun. He had risked getting involved, potentially angering a regular customer because he knew something wasn't right. Gus. My voice was thick with emotion. This is more important than you know. This proves it. This proves everything. I carefully folded the precious slip of paper and tucked it safely into my wallet. It felt solid, real, a weapon in my hand. Just be careful, Harold, Gus warned again, his voice full of genuine concern. These people, your son included now, it seems they're playing for keeps. Don't underestimate how low they'll stoop. I won't, I said, my voice hardening with resolve. Thanks to you, I won't. I owe you, Gus. More than I can say. Forget it, Gus waved it off, though his expression remained serious. Just take care of yourself, and let me know if you need anything else. Anything at all. I nodded, clapping him briefly on the shoulder. I will. Thanks again. I turned and walked out of the small office back into the dim bar, leaving Gus standing there amidst the stacks of invoices. I walked out holding a crumpled appointment slip that felt heavier and more powerful than any legal document Finch could ever draft. They thought they were in control. They had no idea the game had changed. The knock on my front door came mid-afternoon the next day. I'd spent the morning tidying up, trying to make everything look normal, hiding the burner phone Davies had suggested and the notes I'd taken. Peeking through the peephole, I saw them, Nathan and Beatrice, standing side by side on my porch, holding a bouquet of flowers that looked ridiculously out of place and wearing identical expressions of forced solicitude. Showtime. I opened the door slowly, putting on a slightly bewildered look. Nathan, Beatrice, what a surprise. Surprise, Dad, Nathan said, stepping inside, his voice overly cheerful. We were in the neighborhood, thought we'd drop by and see how you're doing. Brought you some flowers. Beatrice followed, handing me the bouquet with a tight smile. Oh, well, thank you. That's thoughtful, I mumbled, taking the flowers awkwardly. They smelled vaguely synthetic. Come on in, I guess. They settled onto my sofa, looking around the familiar living room as if inspecting it. Beatrice ran a finger along the coffee table, checking for dust. Everything looks tidy, Harold, she commented, as if surprised. I try to keep things in order, I said, sitting in my armchair opposite them, feeling like I was bracing for an attack. Good, Nathan said quickly. He leaned forward, placing a thick manila envelope on the coffee table between us. So, Dad, remember those papers we talked about yesterday? The ones to help manage things. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral, maybe a little confused. Papers. Right. Something about helping with bills. Exactly. Nathan seized on it. Just making things easier for you. So I brought them over like I said. Mr. Finch, my lawyer, drafted them up. Very standard stuff. He slid the envelope towards me. We can go through them right now, get it all signed and sorted. Won't take long at all. Beatrice leaned forward too, placing a hand gently on my knee. Her touch felt cold. It's just a simple power of attorney, Harold. It doesn't change anything day to day. It just means if heaven forbid you ever got sick or couldn't manage things yourself for a bit, Nathan could step in and make sure your bills are paid, your accounts are safe. It's for your protection, really. She delivered the lines perfectly, dripping with false concern. I picked up the envelope, my hand deliberately slow, slightly shaky. I pulled out the sheaf of papers dense with legal jargon. My goodness, I murmured, holding them at arm's length. The print is so small these days. Hard for these old eyes. I fumbled in my pocket for my reading glasses, put them on with exaggerated care. It's pretty straightforward, Dad, Nathan said, his foot starting to tap impatiently on the rug. Basically, you appoint me as your agent to handle financial matters if needed. I squinted at the first page. Durable power of attorney. Principal. Agent. I mumbled the words slowly. Fiduciary duty. Incapacity. Seems like a lot of legal talk. I looked up at them, feigning bewilderment. Are you sure this is simple? Beatrice sighed, a barely audible huff of impatience. Harold, it's standard. Everyone does this. It's responsible planning. You wouldn't want your affairs to be in chaos if something happened. Would you think of the stress it would cause? She was trying to guilt me using the fear of burdening others. Well, no, of course not, I said slowly. But it's a big decision, isn't it? Giving someone control over everything. I let my voice trail off, looking down at the papers again. I told you, son, I wanted, Jim from the VFW to have a look. He knows about these things. Nathan's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. Dad, Jim from the VFW. Really, this is proper legal stuff. Finch is a professional. He made sure it's all correct and protects you. I'm sure he did, son, I said, trying to sound reasonable but stubborn. But Jim, he explained some things to me once about pitfalls. Always good to be careful, right? Don't want to sign something I don't fully understand. I tapped the papers thoughtfully. Maybe I can drop these off to him tomorrow. Tomorrow. Beatrice cut in, her voice sharper now. Harold, why delay? We're here now. Nathan can explain anything you don't understand. Don't you trust your own son to look out for your best interests? Her eyes narrowed, challenging me. The accusation hung in the air. I looked from her sharp face to Nathan's strained expression. Of course I trust Nathan, I said, injecting a note of wounded pride. But this isn't just about trust, is it? It's about being responsible, making sure I know what I'm signing. Martha always said, read the fine print, Harold. I invoked my late wife's name deliberately, hoping it might make them back off slightly. It didn't work as well as I hoped. Nathan leaned forward again, his voice taking on a harder edge masked by a thin layer of patience. Dad, we are trying to be responsible. That's the whole point. Putting this off, it's not responsible. What if you had a fall tomorrow? What if you got confused? Who would handle things then? It would be a mess. This paper prevents that mess. He was subtly reinforcing their narrative. That I was frail, confused, an accident waiting to happen. I felt cornered. They weren't going to leave easily. I needed to end this conversation without signing, but without raising too much suspicion. I looked down at the papers again, then back up, adopting a look of weary resignation. All right. You've given me a lot to think about. I pushed the papers back into the envelope. Let me just sit with these for a bit. Read them properly when my head's clearer. Maybe tonight. You can come back tomorrow and we'll talk again. Nathan and Beatrice exchanged a long look. I could see the silent argument in their eyes. Push now, or wait. Beatrice gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Nathan sighed, forcing the fake smile back onto his face. Okay, Dad. If you need time, take time. But just tonight, all right. We really should get this finalized tomorrow. For everyone's peace of mind. The underlying message was clear. This delay was temporary. All right, son. Tomorrow then, I agreed, feeling a sliver of relief. I had dodged the bullet for now. They stood up, the visit abruptly over now that their main objective hadn't been achieved. Beatrice picked up her purse, her smile even tighter than before. Take care of yourself, Harold. Don't overtire yourself reading all that legal stuff. I'll manage, I said, walking them to the door. As they stepped out onto the porch, Nathan turned back one last time. We're just trying to help Dad. Remember that. I watched them get into Nathan's car and drive away, the bouquet of cheap flowers sitting accusingly on my coffee table. The pressure was definitely mounting. They wouldn't wait long. Tomorrow they'd be back and they'd expect a signature. I needed Davies to move fast. I needed more than just stalling tactics. I needed proof, hard proof. And I needed it before they decided to bring Dr. Coleman into play. I barely had time to put the power of attorney papers down on the side table, the cheap paper feeling like poison under my fingertips when the doorbell rang again. My stomach plummeted. So soon, I thought Nathan said tomorrow. Had they been waiting just down the street expecting me to sign immediately? Or was this something else? My hand instinctively went to my pocket, touching the reassuring outline of the burner phone Davies had insisted I get. I moved cautiously to the door, peering through the peephole again. My blood ran cold. It wasn't Nathan or Beatrice this time. Standing on my porch were two men in suits. One was the slick lawyer I'd seen with Nathan yesterday, Finch. The other was an older man, maybe late 50s, with thinning gray hair, spectacles perched on his nose, carrying a worn leather doctor's bag. He had a vaguely professional air, but something about his eyes, slightly shifty behind the lenses, felt wrong. Dr. Coleman. They hadn't waited until Monday. They were here now. Behind them, pulling up to the curb with perfect timing, was Nathan's car. He and Beatrice got out, hurrying up the walk, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of concern. This was coordinated, a planned ambush. My mind raced. Davies's advice: stall. Don't confront yet. Gather proof. But they were forcing my hand. Refusing the examination could be twisted into proof of incompetence. Agreeing meant subjecting myself to Coleman's biased assessment. A trap either way. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door, trying to look merely surprised, perhaps a little flustered. Nathan, Beatrice. You're back already, and who are these gentlemen, Dad? Nathan said, stepping forward, placing a hand on my arm possessively. We were so worried after we left. We just felt we couldn't wait. This is Mr. Finch, my lawyer, you remember, and this is Dr. Coleman. He's a specialist, very highly recommended. He was kind enough to make a house call on short notice just to check on you, make sure everything's all right. Finch stepped forward, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just a formality, Mr. Miller. Given your age and your son's understandable concern, a quick health assessment is prudent before finalizing any important legal documents, like the power of attorney. Standard procedure, really. Protects everyone. Dr. Coleman nodded, adjusting his spectacles. Indeed. Won't take long. Just a few routine questions, check your blood pressure, perhaps a simple memory test. Nothing to worry about. He hefted his bag slightly. They were trying to make it sound routine, harmless. But I knew better. This wasn't a checkup. It was an interrogation disguised as medical care designed to produce the result they needed. A house call, that's very unusual, I said, stalling, trying to appear merely old-fashioned and confused. I have my own doctor, you know. Dr. Evans. Been seeing him for 20 years. If I need a checkup, I'll go see him. Of course, Dad, Nathan said soothingly. But Dr. Coleman specializes in cognitive health for seniors. Just to be thorough. Beatrice and I have noticed you seem a bit forgetful lately. Misplacing things. Repeating stories. We just want to make absolutely sure everything is okay before you sign those papers. He exchanged a significant look with Beatrice, who nodded sadly. Forgetful, I bristled, dropping the confused act slightly. I'm perfectly fine, Nathan. A little tired sometimes maybe, but my mind is as sharp as ever. I don't need a specialist checking my memory. Now Harold Beatrice intervened, her voice like smooth syrup. Don't be difficult. We're only doing this because we love you. It's just a quick check. If everything's fine, then wonderful, but if there are any slight issues starting, isn't it better to know early so we can help? They kept using that word, help themselves to my money. I appreciate the thought. I said, trying to keep my voice even, but I don't consent to an examination by a doctor. I don't know, especially not one brought here under these circumstances. I feel perfectly competent, and I see no need for this. I stood firm in the doorway, blocking their entry. Finch's smile tightened. Coleman shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable now that the routine facade was cracking. Nathan's expression hardened. Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder how, Nathan, I challenged him, looking him straight in the eye. Harder for you to get what you want. Finch stepped forward again, his voice losing its earlier smoothness, taking on a sharper, legalistic tone. Mr. Miller, I must advise you that your refusal to undergo a basic competency assessment, particularly when concerns have been raised by your immediate family regarding your recent behavior and memory lapses, could be interpreted legally. Interpreted how I demanded, though I already knew the answer. It could be seen as evidence that you are aware of potential cognitive decline and are attempting to conceal it, Finch stated coldly. Your son and daughter-in-law have documented several instances. Your disappearance yesterday, your apparent confusion today, your resistance to sensible precautions, like the power of attorney, combined with a refusal for a simple medical evaluation. He let the threat hang in the air. Coleman cleared his throat, picking up the cue. Medically speaking, resistance to assessment is often a symptom in itself in early-stage dementia or related cognitive disorders. The patient often lacks insight into their own condition. Lack of insight. Dementia. They were building their case right here on my doorstep, using my own self-defense against me. I felt the walls of the trap closing in tighter. They had anticipated my refusal. This was part of their script. This is outrageous, I said, my voice trembling slightly now, not with fear, but with anger. You barge into my home with a strange doctor and lawyer, accuse me of being senile based on lies from my own son, and then threaten me with legal action if I don't submit to your bogus examination, Dad. We're not threatening. Nathan started, but Finch cut him off with a raised hand. Mr. Miller, let me be perfectly clear, Finch said, his eyes like chips of ice. Your family is deeply concerned. They have sought legal counsel, myself, and medical advice, Dr. Coleman, because they believe you may no longer be capable of managing your significant assets safely and responsibly. They have a legal and moral obligation to act in your best interest. If you refuse reasonable steps to assess your capacity, such as this examination, we will be left with no choice but to petition the probate court to appoint a legal guardian for you. Guardianship. The word hit me like a physical blow. That was the end game. Complete control. Stripping me of all autonomy. The court would review the evidence, Finch continued relentlessly, including Dr. Coleman's professional opinion, based on the family's reports, and your refusal to cooperate, along with the documented instances of concerning behavior. It's a serious step, Mr. Miller, and one we hope to avoid. Agreeing to this simple assessment today is the easiest way to demonstrate your competence and put your family's minds at ease. My mind was racing. If I slammed the door, they'd use it against me. If I let them in, Coleman would write whatever report Finch and Nathan paid him to write. I needed to stall, but how Davies needed more time. Pete needed more time. I looked past them towards the street, hoping for what? A miracle, an escape. There was none. I was cornered right here on my own porch by my son, his wife, a crooked lawyer, and a doctor for hire. The carefully constructed world I thought I knew had completely crumbled, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. But deep down beneath the fear and the anger, a stubborn spark remained. They hadn't won yet. I took another slow breath, trying to control the tremor in my hands, meeting Finch's cold stare with one of my own. I stared at Finch, then at Coleman, then at my son Nathan, whose face was a mask of strained patience, and Beatrice, who looked like a cat ready to pounce. Guardianship. Petition the court. They had it all figured out. My refusal was just another piece of their manufactured evidence. For a moment, a wave of weariness washed over me. Maybe it would be easier to just give in, sign the papers, let them take what they wanted. Avoid the fight, the public humiliation. But then I thought of Martha. I thought of the years we worked side by side, saving, planning, dreaming of a secure retirement, of leaving something meaningful behind. I thought of Gus's warning, Pete's loyalty, Davy's steady competence. No, easier wasn't right. Easier wasn't me. So, I said, my voice surprisingly steady even though my insides were churning, you intend to go to court armed with lies from my son and a bought and paid for medical opinion to try and steal my property. Finch bristled. Mr. Miller, those are serious accusations. We are merely following procedure based on legitimate concerns. Legitimate concerns. A car door slammed shut outside, closer this time. Footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway. My heart leaped. Could it be? Before Finch could continue his oily justification, my front door swung open. Standing there, calm and imposing, was Robert Davies, my lawyer. Beside him, looking solid and grimly determined, was my friend Pete Johnson. Davies stepped inside, his sharp eyes taking in the scene in an instant. Me cornered on my porch, Finch and Coleman flanking me, Nathan and Beatrice hovering anxiously. Pete stood just behind him, a silent, formidable presence. Gentlemen, Davies said, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. And Beatrice, quite a gathering. I hope you weren't unduly pressuring my client. Finch and Coleman froze, completely blindsided. Nathan's jaw dropped. Beatrice let out a small, strangled gasp. Davies, what are you doing here? Finch stammered, losing his composure for the first time. I represent Mr. Harold Miller, Davies replied smoothly, stepping further into the entryway, effectively positioning himself between me and the others. Pete moved to stand beside me on the porch step. And I arrived just in time, it seems, to hear some rather alarming threats being made regarding petitions for guardianship, based on unsubstantiated claims of incompetence. He placed his leather briefcase firmly on my porch railing. Now, Davies, it was just a discussion of options. Finch began trying to regain control. Was it? Davies raised an eyebrow, because it sounded remarkably like coercion. He opened his briefcase, pulling out a slim folder. Perhaps we should review the actual evidence regarding Mr. Miller's competence, shall we? He held up a small, crumpled piece of paper. Let's start with this. An appointment reminder for Mr. Harold Miller at Dr. Alan Coleman's clinic, scheduled for Monday, November 3rd. Purpose Cognitive Capacity Evaluation. He looked directly at Coleman, whose face had gone pale. Doctor, did Mr. Miller make this appointment himself? Coleman stammered, adjusting his glasses nervously. Well, no, his son arranged it, expressing concerns. Concerns, Davies repeated skeptically. Concerns conveniently timed just as Mr. Miller was being pressured to sign a power of attorney drafted by Mr. Finch here. A document Mr. Miller had explicitly stated he wanted reviewed independently. He didn't wait for an answer. We also have a sworn statement from a witness, Mr. Gus Halloway of the Rusty Mug, detailing conversations he overheard between Nathan Miller and Beatrice Miller regarding their desire to gain control of Mr. Miller's assets, and meetings between Nathan Miller and Mr. Finch at the pub, discussing legal strategies to achieve this. Nathan looked like he'd been punched. Beatrice shot him a venomous glare. Finch shifted his weight, avoiding Davies' eyes. Furthermore, Davies continued, pulling out another document. Contrary to the vague assertions of forgetfulness and confusion, Mr. Miller underwent a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation yesterday afternoon at the Sedgefield Neurological Institute, requested by my office. The results. He paused for effect. Mr. Miller demonstrates cognitive function well above average for his age group. He is fully lucid-oriented and possesses complete capacity to manage his personal and financial affairs. The evaluating physician's report explicitly states there are 0 clinical indications of dementia or any other cognitive impairment. He placed the official-looking report on top of the appointment slip. Any report suggesting otherwise, Dr. Coleman, particularly one signed without a proper examination, would constitute serious medical misconduct. Wouldn't you agree? Coleman visibly flinched, looking trapped. Finch remained silent, his face grim. Nathan opened his mouth and closed it again, speechless. Beatrice looked wildly between her husband and the lawyer's, panic dawning in her eyes. So, Davies summarized, his voice crisp. The narrative of a confused, incompetent old man seems to crumble rather quickly under scrutiny, doesn't it? Which brings us to the power of attorney you were so eager for Mr. Miller to sign. He gestured towards the manila envelope still clutched in Nathan's hand. Attempting to secure control of assets through deception and potentially fraudulent medical claims is, as Mr. Finch surely knows, a serious matter. We are prepared to pursue legal action for attempted fraud, conspiracy, and professional misconduct against all involved parties. Finch finally found his voice, though it lacked its earlier confidence. Now hold on, Davies. This is premature. My client was merely acting out of concern. Concern? Davies cut him off sharply. Concern for assets they perhaps mistakenly believed were easily accessible. He paused, letting the question hang in the air, then delivered the final devastating blow. Which brings me to the most pertinent point, gentlemen. And Beatrice. He looked directly at Nathan. You seem to be operating under a significant misapprehension regarding your father's estate. Nathan looked confused. Misapprehension. What are you talking about? Davies allowed himself a small, almost pitying smile. I'm talking about the Harold and Martha Miller Irrevocable Living Trust, established 5 years ago, shortly after Mrs. Miller passed away. The words hit the porch like a pom-pom. Utter silence. Nathan stared, bewildered. Beatrice's perfectly made-up face contorted in disbelief. Finch's eyes widened, then narrowed in frantic calculation. Coleman just looked lost. Trust, Nathan whispered. What trust? Dad never mentioned a trust. Perhaps he didn't feel the need to, Davies replied coolly. As per the terms of the trust agreement finalized and legally executed on April 12, 2020, Mr. Miller transferred ownership of this house. He gestured around them, and the bulk of his investment portfolio into the trust. He remains the sole trustee with full control during his lifetime. However, upon his incapacity or death, the assets are managed and distributed strictly according to the trust's terms, not according to a simple power of attorney or a standard will regarding those assets. And what are those terms? Beatrice breathed, her voice barely audible, the color draining from her face. The terms, Davies stated clearly, enjoying the moment, designate the Sedgefield Children's Hospital Foundation as the primary residual beneficiary, receiving a significant majority share, fulfilling Mrs. Miller's long-standing charitable wishes. Your husband Nathan is named as a secondary beneficiary. Secondary? Nathan croaked. Indeed. Entitled to receive a smaller percentage of the remaining trust assets and only... Davies emphasized each word, after his father's passing, if he can provide evidence satisfactory to the successor trustee, which I might add is the trust department of Sterling Bank, not Nathan himself, demonstrating 1 full year of stable employment and responsible personal financial management prior to any distribution. The trust document gives the successor trustee considerable discretion in evaluating this condition and determining payout schedules. It was designed quite presciently, it seems, to encourage fiscal responsibility. It was a total checkmate. The house, the investments, the gold mine Beatrice thought they were sitting on was locked away legally, shielded its distribution, tied to conditions Nathan likely couldn't meet anytime soon, with the lion's share going elsewhere entirely. Their entire scheme, predicated on gaining quick access to my main assets, had just evaporated. Beatrice let out a strangled cry, grabbing Nathan's arm. "You idiot! You told me it was simple. You told me everything was in his name." "I didn't know," Nathan yelled back, pulling his arm away, his face crumbling. "Dad never told me." Finch took a step back, visibly distancing himself, his face a mask of professional horror, likely already calculating how to salvage his own career from this disaster. Coleman looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Davies calmly gathered his papers. "So, gentlemen, Beatrice, it appears your urgent need for a power of attorney and a competency evaluation is rather moot regarding the primary assets, and your attempts to procure these through questionable means now look considerably less like family concern and considerably more like actionable fraud." He looked pointedly at Finch and Coleman. "I suspect the State Bar and the Medical Board will be very interested in our findings." The carefully constructed facade had shattered completely, leaving only the ugly reality of their greed and desperation exposed under the harsh afternoon light. The air on the porch crackled with stunned silence. Beatrice stared at Davies, her mouth slightly open, the color completely gone from her face. Nathan looked utterly lost, shaking his head slightly as if trying to wake from a nightmare. Finch and Coleman exchanged panicked glances, their professional masks slipping to reveal naked fear. Davies didn't give them time to recover. He pressed his advantage, his voice sharp and precise. "So let's summarize the situation, shall we? We have evidence of a conspiracy to fraudulently obtain control of Mr. Miller's assets through coercion, falsified medical assessments, and undue influence." He looked pointedly at Finch. "Mr. Finch, as an officer of the court, your involvement in drafting documents based on what appears to be manufactured grounds for incapacity, and your presence here today, attempting to intimidate Mr. Miller, exposes you to severe disciplinary action from the State Bar, not to mention potential criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud." Finch swallowed hard, his usual slick demeanor gone. "Now, Davies, let's not jump to conclusions. My client merely expressed concerns." "Concerns?" Davies cut him off. "Concerns that conveniently aligned with a plan to bypass the clear terms of an existing irrevocable trust. You failed to discover due diligence seems lacking, Mr. Finch. Or perhaps willfully ignored." He turned his attention to Coleman, who flinched. "And, Dr. Coleman, your history with the Medical Board regarding questionable competency assessments is already a matter of public record. Providing a fraudulent medical opinion, or even preparing to do so, based solely on biased family reports without examining the patient, constitutes gross professional misconduct. Falsifying medical documents to facilitate fraud carries significant criminal penalties, including potential prison time and the permanent loss of your medical license." Coleman took a step back, wringing his hands. I haven't signed anything definitive yet. I was merely here to assess based on lies," Davies countered, "with a predetermined outcome in mind, judging by the appointment slip and Mr. Houghton Finch's presence. I think the district attorney's office will find that assessment rather damning." He let the threat hang in the air, thick and heavy. Then he turned to Nathan and Beatrice, his voice losing its legal chill and taking on a tone of cold contempt. "And as for you two, attempting to defraud your own father, conspiring to have him falsely declared incompetent, trying to coerce him into signing legal documents under false pretenses. These actions are not just morally reprehensible, they are illegal. Conspiracy to commit fraud, potential elder abuse charges. The legal ramifications are severe. And given the evidence we possess, witness statements, the appointment slip, Mr. Miller's confirmed competence, and the very existence of the protective trust, your chances in court are negligible." That's when the dam finally broke. Beatrice rounded on Nathan, her face contorted with fury. "This is your fault," she shrieked, forgetting all pretense of the concerned daughter-in-law. "Your stupid plan, your useless lawyer, you told me it was foolproof, you told me the old man was practically senile already, you told me the money was basically ours." Nathan recoiled, stunned by her venom. Then his own anger flared. My fault. You were the one pushing day and night. When are we getting the money, Nathan? Why is your father being so difficult? We need that house, you and your endless spending. The credit card bills, the car payments, the vacations we couldn't afford. That's why we needed the money. So you blame me for your weakness, Beatrice spat back. You couldn't stand up to your own mother. You couldn't manage your own finances. I had to come up with a plan because you were drowning in debt and too pathetic to do anything about it. A plan? Nathan laughed bitterly. This wasn't a plan, Beatrice. It was a disaster. Using Finch, paying off Coleman, lying to my own father's face, and for what? A trust fund we can barely touch. You didn't even know about the trust. Because you were supposed to know, she screamed. You're his son. You were supposed to know about his damn money. All those years sucking up to him, and you didn't even know about a trust. Some provider you are. Their ugly argument raged, stripping away the facade of the happy, successful couple, revealing the desperation, greed, and mutual contempt simmering beneath. Finch and Coleman looked increasingly desperate to escape the crossfire, inching towards the edge of the porch. Pete stood impassively beside me, a silent witness, his presence a solid anchor in the storm. I watched my son and daughter-in-law tear each other apart and felt numb. The anger was still there, a cold ember, but overriding it was a profound, aching sadness. This was what they had become. This was the result of their choices. Money hadn't just corrupted them, it had hollowed them out, leaving behind selfish, desperate husks. Enough, Davies finally said, his voice cutting through their squabble. Your marital disputes are irrelevant to the legal situation you both find yourselves in. He looked at Finch and Coleman. Gentlemen, I suggest you retain competent legal counsel for yourselves immediately. My office will be forwarding our findings to the relevant authorities this afternoon. Finch nodded curtly, grabbing Coleman by the arm. We're leaving. They practically fled down the porch steps, scrambling into Finch's car without a backward glance. Nathan watched them go, then turned back to me, his face a wreck of tears, snot, and desperation. Dad, please, he sobbed, taking a step towards me. Please don't do this. It was Beatrice. She pressured me. The debts. I didn't know what else to do. Beatrice scoffed from behind him. Oh, cry me a river, Nathan. Don't try and pin this all on me now. You were in it just as deep. You wanted that money just as much as I did. She turned to me, trying one last desperate appeal, her eyes wild. Harold, please, think of the family. Think of the grandkids you might have someday. Don't ruin your son's life over some misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Even now she couldn't face the truth. There was no misunderstanding, Beatrice. I said, my voice quiet but firm. There was a deliberate plan to defraud an old man. My lawyer has the evidence. The authorities will handle it now. But the money, Nathan wailed. What are we going to do? We'll lose everything, the house, the cars. Beatrice will leave me. Perhaps you should have thought of that, Davies interjected coolly, before you conspired to steal from your father. He turned to me. Harold, do you want them removed from the premises? I looked at Nathan, my son sobbing like a child who'd been caught stealing cookies. I looked at Beatrice, her face pale with fury and fear, already calculating her next move. Probably how to salvage something for herself from the wreckage. There was nothing left here. No remorse, only regret at being caught. No love, only frantic self-preservation. The family I thought I had, the son I thought I knew, they were gone, replaced by these grasping, desperate strangers. My heart ached, but my resolve held firm. This was the consequence of their actions, the bitter harvest they had sown. I looked at Davies, then back at the wreck my son and daughter-in-law had become, their faces streaked with tears, and fury accusations still hanging heavy in the air between them. Pete stood silently beside me, a solid, unwavering presence. The decision wasn't hard, but it ached deep in my bones. Yes, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying in the sudden stillness. Yes, I want them to leave. Now. I turned to face Nathan and Beatrice fully. The noise, the shouting, the panic seemed to drain away, leaving only a vast, empty space where a family used to be. Nathan, Beatrice, you need to go. Nathan stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, red-rimmed from crying. Go, Dad, go. Where? What are you saying? You can't just kick us out. I'm your son. His voice cracked on the last word, a raw plea that tugged at something ancient and deep within me, the instinct to protect, to forgive. But the image of him outside Finch's office, grinning, plotting, flashed in my mind. The memory of Gus's warning, the cold dread I felt hiding in that alley. That instinct was now overridden by the harsh reality of his betrayal. You were my son, Nathan. I said the words tasting like ash. The son I raised would never have done this, would never have conspired with strangers to defraud his own father, would never have tried to have me declared incompetent to steal what wasn't his. But Dad, I didn't mean, it wasn't supposed to, he stammered, grasping for excuses that no longer held any weight. What exactly wasn't supposed to happen, Nathan? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Were you not supposed to get caught? Were you not supposed to find out about the trust? Or were you simply not supposed to face the consequences of your actions? I shook my head, a profound weariness settling over me. You made your choices, both of you. You chose greed, you chose deception, you chose to value money more than family, more than honesty, more than love. Beatrice, who had been momentarily stunned into silence, found her voice again sharp and bitter. Love, don't lecture us about love, old man. This is about survival. Something you wouldn't understand, sitting on your pile of money while your own son struggles. Struggles, I countered, turning my gaze to her. Struggles to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford. Struggles because you bleed him dry with your demands. I worked for 50 years, Beatrice. Honest work. I saved. I sacrificed. Especially after Martha died. What I have, I earned. What you wanted, you tried to steal. We didn't steal anything, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Planning to defraud someone, falsifying documents, attempting to strip them of their legal rights. That sounds an awful lot like attempted theft to me, Davies interjected dryly from the doorway. Dad, please, Nathan pleaded again, ignoring Beatrice, his eyes fixed on mine. Don't do this. We can fix it. I'll pay you back. Somehow. We can go to counseling. Just don't cut me off like this. Please. The offer felt hollow, born of desperation, not genuine remorse. Pay me back with what? More lies, more schemes, and counseling couldn't undo the fundamental breach of trust, the cold calculation behind his actions. There's nothing left to fix right now, Nathan. I said, the sadness overwhelming the anger for a moment. The damage is done. You didn't just break my trust. You shattered it. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Here are the new boundaries. From this moment on, there will be no more financial support from me. None. Not for rent, not for cars, not for emergencies. You are on your own, completely. Nathan looked stricken. But Dad, how will we? That is no longer my concern, I stated firmly. You are an adult. You have a job. You will figure it out just like millions of other people do every day. Maybe you'll finally learn the value of $1 earned honestly. Beatrice scoffed loudly. He's pathetic. He won't last a month without your handouts. I ignored her, keeping my focus on Nathan. Furthermore, any future communication between us, if there is any, will go through Mr. Davies. Do not call me. Do not come to my house unannounced. Do not send messages. If and only if you demonstrate a significant sustained change in your behavior, your finances, and your attitude over a long period of time, perhaps we can revisit this. But until then, this is goodbye. The finality of the words hung in the air. Nathan seemed to shrink, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a dawning horror. Beatrice just glared, her face a mask of impotent rage. "Now," I said, gesturing towards the door, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Leave my property, both of you." Beatrice opened her mouth, perhaps for one last insult, but Davies took a step forward. "I believe Mr. Miller has made himself clear. Trespassing charges can be filed immediately if you fail to comply." She snapped her mouth shut, grabbed Nathan's arm forcefully. "Let's go, Nathan. There's nothing for us here anymore. He's made his choice." She practically dragged him down the porch steps, throwing one last hateful look over her shoulder before shoving him towards his car. Nathan didn't resist. He stumbled along like a puppet whose strings had been cut. His shoulders slumped, his face buried in his hands. He didn't look back. I watched them drive away, the sound of their car engine fading down the street, until only the quiet chirping of birds remained. Pete put a hand gently on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Harold. The hard thing, but the right thing." I nodded, unable to speak. The relief was immense, a physical unburdening. The threat was gone. My home, my finances, my autonomy were secure. But beneath the relief was a deep, hollow ache. I had won the battle, but I had lost my son. Maybe not forever, but for the foreseeable future, the bond was broken, perhaps irreparably. The victory felt strangely empty, tainted by the sorrow of what led to it. I turned and walked back into my house, the house built with love and sacrifice, now a silent testament to betrayal and its bitter consequences. The fight was over, but the healing I knew would take a long, long time. Months melted away, turning the raw wound of betrayal into a dull ache, a scar I would always carry, but one that no longer controlled my every thought. Autumn leaves painted the trees outside my window in hues of gold and crimson, a peaceful contrast to the storm that had raged through my life earlier that year. My house felt like home again, quiet, orderly, filled with Martha's lingering presence in the familiar scent of lemon polish and the photos on the mantelpiece. The faint paranoia had faded, replaced by a quiet vigilance and the reassuring click of the new deadbolt Davies had advised installing. News trickled in mostly through Pete, who still had his ear to the ground. Finch, the slick lawyer, was facing a serious ethics investigation by the state bar. Apparently, Davies had unearthed other questionable cases in his past, and mine was the tipping point. His career was likely over. Dr. Coleman fared even worse. The medical board, armed with his past reprimand and the irrefutable evidence from my case, especially the appointment slip and my clean bill of health from Sedgefield, had suspended his license indefinitely pending a full hearing. He wouldn't be signing any more fraudulent competency reports anytime soon. Justice, it seemed, was grinding slowly but surely. As for Nathan and Beatrice, their downfall was less official, but perhaps more personally devastating. Pete heard through the grapevine that the financial pressure combined with the public humiliation of their failed scheme, word got around even without headlines, had shattered their already fragile marriage. Beatrice apparently had left Nathan, taking what little she could salvage and moving back in with her parents. Nathan was struggling. He'd had to sell the flashy sedan Pete reported seeing him driving, an old beat-up hatchback. Rumor had it, he was desperately trying to refinance the mortgage on their oversized house, the one bought on the expectation of my future financial demise, and was likely facing foreclosure. He was still employed, surprisingly, but his reputation at work was tarnished. People talked. People judged. He was paying the price not just legally through potential civil suits Davies kept simmering on the back burner, but socially and financially isolated and adrift. Did I take pleasure in their misfortune? No. Hearing about Nathan's struggles stirred a complex mix of sadness and grim validation. He had made his bed. Now he had to lie in it. My role was simply to ensure he didn't try to drag me back down with him. My days settled into a comfortable rhythm. Fishing with Pete down at Miller's Pond became a regular fixture again. We'd sit for hours, lines cast, barely speaking, sometimes just enjoying the quiet companionship, the gentle lap of water against the shore. He never pried about Nathan, just offered silent support, a shared understanding that ran deeper than words. Occasionally, I'd drop by the Rusty Mug for a beer, usually in the quiet afternoon. Gus would greet me with a nod, pour my usual draft, and we'd chat about the weather, the local sports team, anything but the events that had brought us closer. But there was an unspoken respect between us now, a shared knowledge of a secret kept, a truth revealed. He'd clapped me on the back once, shortly after Nathan and Beatrice left my house that final day. "Glad you sorted it out," Harold was all he said, but it meant the world. Davies handled everything with quiet efficiency. The irrevocable trust was ironclad, protecting the house and investments. My personal accounts were secure. I updated my will, formalizing the trust's terms as my final wishes, ensuring the hospital received its due, and adding a small, separate bequest for Pete. For Nathan, the conditional clause remained, a distant possibility entirely dependent on his own actions. Davies agreed it was fair, providing a path, however narrow, for potential reconciliation while protecting my legacy. One crisp October morning, sorting through the mail, I found a plain white envelope with Nathan's handwriting. No return address. My hand hesitated before opening it. What now? More excuses, more demands disguised as apologies. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper folded neatly. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike. "Dad," it began. "I don't know if you'll even read this. I guess I deserve that. I know sorry isn't enough. Not even close. What we did, was wrong. So wrong. I see that now. Living like this, scrambling to pay bills I should have been able to handle years ago, was losing Bay, losing everything. It's hell, but it's a hell I made. I don't expect you to forgive me, maybe ever. But I wanted to say, I've started a new job, second job actually, driving deliveries at night. It's humbling, but it's honest work. I'm trying, Dad. Trying to stand on my own feet like you always wanted me to, like I should have learned to do decades ago. Trying to be someone maybe someday you wouldn't be ashamed of again. Maybe one day I can earn back. Not your trust, maybe that's gone forever. But maybe just a conversation. No pressure. No asking for anything. Just to talk. Nathan. I read the letter twice, 3 times. The words felt different from his earlier desperate pleas. There was a rawness, a humility I hadn't heard from him in years. Was it genuine or just another manipulation, a new angle now that the old ones had failed? I didn't know, and honestly it didn't matter right now. He was right. Sorry wasn't enough. Actions spoke louder. I folded the letter carefully and put it away in my desk drawer beside Martha's picture. I didn't reply, not yet. Maybe not ever. But the bitterness that had lodged itself in my heart felt slightly less sharp. The door wasn't completely closed, perhaps. Just locked, waiting for the right key, a key only Nathan himself could forge through sustained, genuine change. I walked out onto my porch, breathing in the cool autumn air. The neighborhood was quiet. My house stood solid around me, safe, secure. Mine. I had faced the storm, navigated the treacherous waters of betrayal, and emerged weary but whole. The future was uncertain, especially regarding my son. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like my future mine, to shape mine, to live in peace. And that was a victory worth fighting for. This story powerfully illustrates that setting firm boundaries, even with family, is crucial for self-respect and security. Harold's journey shows how unchecked generosity can unintentionally enable financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. Recognizing red flags, trusting your instincts, and seeking professional help, like lawyers or trusted friends, are vital steps. Ultimately, the narrative underscores that true respect isn't bought with financial support, and that reclaiming your independence and dignity, however painful the process, is essential for peace of mind. It's never too late to protect yourself. What lessons did you take away from Harold's experience? Let us know in the comments.